Welcome back to the Start to Finish course on upgrading to .NET Core. We are currently in the module focused on the actual update of our application. And in this lesson, we're going to fix those pesky bugs in MVC that have caused us to not be able to even start our application yet. So let's go with Visual Studio. And to start off, I've got the other project unloaded, so that's good. We've got the tracker MVC UI set up as the startup project. That's good as well. Now let's just run this and see what the error is. So this is always a good start, is just finding where the errors are by running it and seeing what happens. And we get this global config.connection.get tournament underscore all object reference not set to an instance of an object. The tracker library.globalconfig.connection.get returned null. So if we hit F12 on this, actually no, because we need to hit Control F12 to go to the implementation, which there's two implementations. We're probably using maybe a SQL connector, I'm not sure. Let's find out real quick. So there's a SQL connector. Let's open the text connector as well. So we have both. I'm going to stop this now. And we're going to look at what does the startup, where is it looking for the correct place to look. So for example, if we go back in here and let's load this. If we look down, I believe it may be in the global.asax. It is. So the global.asax has this initialized connections, and it says text file. Let's copy that line. With embedding, we didn't bring this down here. So if we look at program, we have the main, we have run, we have startup, but we don't have anywhere where we're calling that configuration. So the question is, where do you put this? I think the place to put it is going to be in the configure services, because it seems like that is the place to do it. The tracker library, because that's really what it is. It's kind of like a service. Let's control dot to add the using statement there. And that, what it should do is it should allow us to say, okay, this is what we're using. We're using text files for our data access. We can have text files or we can have SQL. Notice here, we can say SQL or text files, and that determines what our data access is going to look like. So let's run this again now that we've added that initialization. So that was in global.asax, and now it looks like we've got something kind of working. It's not quite as pretty, but we got people, there's no people, teams, there's no teams, prizes, there's no prizes. So let's create a new tournament, and looks like enter teams is empty. There's not even an entry here. Let's just create a test tournament. Test MVC. Entry fee is 10 and create. Notice our scheme here is kind of ugly. There's no current tournament still. This isn't quite here yet. So there's something missing in our application. And part of it is if we hit F12 here to look at the developer tools, let's make sure the console is empty. And it is, meaning there's no errors here. So it's not like we're looking for something we didn't find. It's just not quite what I expected because it's not the right color scheme even. So remember that was an orange on here and there's no orange. And there was stuff over here that's not there now. So we now have at least a working application, but it's not quite right yet. So let's track down why. Let's start with that home index view. So we have an action link and that worked. And we have to create a team, create a tournament, and then we have this for each here that is going to loop through our item in model, which the model is going to be a list of tournament model. So let's do this. First of all, let's collapse down a library and unload this old MVC. So they can go away. And let's look at the home controller. And in here, I want to put a breakpoint on the tournaments list and make sure we're actually getting tournaments. So let's hit start. Wait for it to load. And we have tournaments. Tournament count is 0. That's not ideal. We want tournaments in this list. Let's go back to startup. And actually, no, it's program, isn't it? Program. Nope, it is startup. Oh, there it is. Configuration. Let's change this to SQL just in case. I can even check what the other ones were using. Program.cs is using text file. So it's not loading the text files correctly. That's an issue. Because it should be that it works the same exact way because it's the same exact code. So let's find out why it's not the same exact code. So let's close everything but the home controller. It does. Now let's step through this. So we're going to step into, or F11. And this is going to return the full file path. The problem here, and the reason why I don't usually do just a return statement, is because this makes it a little more difficult for me to debug. What I have to do, sorry about that loud car going by. So what I have to do is I have to, let's go to the locals window. Actually, let's go to the immediate window, sorry. I'm going to pin that up. And I am going to say Configuration Manager App Settings File Path. Give me that. And it's going to think about it. And so far, nothing. Let's do this. Let's paste it again to string. Cannot be evaluated well in run mode. See, this makes it more difficult. So now I am going to step backwards. I'm in historical mode, return to live debugging. And now it's actually thinking that I am modifying this. I don't think I am. Let's step in again. And it throws an error. So it's messed up just by trying to use the immediate window and load this up. It's caused a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm in the text connector processor. I'm going to hit stop. And I am going to break this up into a couple of different parts. So I'm going to say string file path equals this right here. And then I'm going to put this value right here. Whoops. That's not wide. Just a file path. There we go. So what this does is it allows me to see what my file path value is going to be. I'm going to put a breakpoint right there after the file path has been created. I'm going to run this. And once it starts up, it's going to go to that breakpoint here. And I can step into, which is going to go to this full file path. And I can actually hit continue to go down to this spot. And the file path here is null. So configuration manager.app settings for file path is null. That's a problem. And that's why we got this value here. So evidently, instead of saying null, it just said, that's the value. Can't find it. And it caused a problem. It crashed because it it's not finding what we're looking for. So with file path being null, of course it can't find the files to load the information. So let's stop this and let's go back to our working tracker UI and look at app.config. File path it's an absolute path, C data tournament tracker. Let's copy that, make sure we have a copy of it. Go to web.config, and it's the same thing. It's C data tournament tracker. So the file path is the same. Now this is using Configuration Manager. I'm wondering, I don't remember, but let's go look at our library here and look at the email logic. And we have global config app key lookup. So that's how we're using the app key lookups here. But here we're using configuration manager.app settings. So let's use this instead. And let's change to file path. Now, why did this work for WinForms and WPF, but not for ASP.NET MVC, or ASP.NET Core MVC? Answer, I don't know. It probably has something to do with how, whether or not that's referenced, that package. That's probably it, but we're going to find out if this does solve our problem. Let's run this again. It's going to put a break. We already had a breakpoint before, so we can just step into this, and we can step over this, and now our file path is still null. So it's not finding our web.config file, even though we've got one in here. Now I do have one thought, and that is if we go to properties here, actually let's collapse this down so we can go to properties, and we look at the output type. An output type for MVC you'd think is a web project, but it's not. It's a console application. Well, a console application, if you had a regular console application, you wouldn't have a web.config, you'd have an app.config. It's a long shot, but it's worth a try. Let's go down here and change this from web.config over to app.config. And let's run this again. Okay, so it's running right now. We step into, we step over, and the file path actually has a file path. If we look at the locals window here, let's pin that up as well. The locals window says that the file path is C data tournament tracker. That's correct. So now if we hit continue on this, and we view the tournaments, we actually have 5 tournaments in the list. If we hit continue, that looks a whole lot better. We actually have tournaments to look at. So old debug, we're hitting this breakpoint again, so let's undo this breakpoint and hit continue. Nothing there because it's already complete, I believe. We can go to people. There's people here. There's teams here, and there's prizes here. We can also create a tournament. Now we can say MVC test tournament. Entry fee is $5. Add these 3 teams and let's add the last first place prize. Hit create. And now it just started generating emails for me, so I know that worked. And there we go. There's our round 1. Mary's team has a bye, and Tim's team has a matchup against Bob. Bob's going to win 5-2. And we'll score the match. And now notice round 1 is complete. And round 2, Mary's team versus Bob's team. So our MVC application now works. So a couple of quirks here. But the biggest one is to remember is that ASP.NET Core web applications are actually console applications. And that sounds a little weird, but the way to remember that kind of is, remember this drop down here for IS Express? The drop down also says Tracker MVC UI. And if we run it this way, we'll get a console application that launches our web application. So there's the console application launching our web application. All right, so this is a web application, therefore it is a console application, which technically is a desktop application, which gets the app.config, not web.config. Now, that's just temporary because long-term you don't want to have an app.config file in your .NET Core project. That's not how we do things anymore. We use the app settings.json file. So we're going to update that, but for now, we're good. Now, the one thing I think we might have forgotten, let me look real quick. Oh, no, we didn't. So if you load the MVC project, you'll notice that it does have a packages.config file. I didn't do anything with that. I didn't collapse that into the csproj file. The reason why is because we're not actually using this project. We're creating a whole new one, and that already has things collapsed right into the csproj file. So there's my references right there, which is just a project reference to the library. Okay, so now we have an MVC core web application that works just like our original MVC application. Because we could rename it, we actually create it in the same project. If you can't rename it, create in the new project, delete the old MVC project, create a new one, and then copy in from your backup. Okay? Either way, we can right-click on here, hit remove, and say, yes, we want to remove it, but also we want to right-click, open this folder in File Explorer, and make sure we delete the MVC UI folder. Because even though you delete it from your project or your solution, it's still there. So we'll delete that. We probably have to close out of Visual Studio. I'll do that in a little bit. I won't do that on camera. But that's it for debugging our MVC application. And that's it for this module, which is just upgrading or updating our application to .NET Core or .NET Standard, respectively. So now what we're going to do in the next module is we're going to look at adding in some of the .NET Core features that don't just come out of the box when you upgrade a project. Now, technically, we didn't upgrade this Tracker MVC UI. Technically, this is a brand new project. So we have things like our startup with our configuration, our configure services, our developer mode, HTTPS redirect, and all those good things in here. So I even have dependency injection now built right into my new MVC application. But I don't have that in my WinForm application or my WPF application. And that's because we just upgrade it in place. So the next module is going to tackle upgrading those to bring in some of that goodness that comes with .NET Core.